I was going to maybe point some things out if this, with the laser pointer. This is a warning. If anyone has cat DNA, I don't want you to go wild. Well, that's not the first. There, that is.
How about that?
So this is what I'm tasked to talk about, highly enriched uranium and thermonuclear secondaries. Let me just go to the next slide, Rick. So this is a rough picture of the Y-12 nuclear weapons complex, which is in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. It is 1/3 of what the Manhattan Project did in Oak Ridge. We had 3 huge facilities, each with hundreds of buildings. Even though they call it a weapons plant, it was actually a massive complex back in the day. And the one that we're going to talk about today is Y-12. Its job during the Manhattan Project was to, well, I'll talk about this in the next slide, I think, but it's in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and it's the only facility in the United States that has the authorized capacity to manufacture highly enriched uranium components for nuclear weapons. So, as you heard Jay talking about Los Alamos doing the plutonium pits, we have a very compartmentalized manufacturing operations in the United States, and when it comes to the 3 key pieces of the nuclear weapons package, the plutonium pit, the primary or the trigger for the bomb, comes from Los Alamos. The highly enriched uranium secondary or CAN subassembly, which is the thermonuclear core, the fusion reaction that makes the massive bomb, comes from Oak Ridge. The non-nuclear components, the arming, fusing, firings, the electronics packages come from the Kansas City plant. And we don't have our friend Ann from Kansas City, but you're going to hear about the work of the Kansas City plant when you hear from Hans and Matthew, because that's what they're going to focus on. So in the past, Y-12 was the facility that was responsible for enriching the uranium that fueled the little boy bomb that destroyed Hiroshima, Japan. And after the end of the Second World War, and one of the other major facilities in Oak Ridge, the K-25 facility, which enriched uranium through gaseous diffusion, came online. And gaseous diffusion turned out to be a cheaper, quicker, more efficient way of enriching uranium. So suddenly Y-12, which had enriched uranium through a massive system of calutrons, was out of a job, and they had to find something else to do. Well, this happened to coincide with the development of the H-bomb. And so Y-12 got the job of manufacturing the thermonuclear core for the H-bomb. And these are also called CAN subassemblies, or CSAs. And sometimes they're called secondaries because the plutonium pit is the primary, the trigger, and it triggers the second bigger part of the bomb. So if you hear any of those terms, CAN subassemblies, secondaries, CSAs, they're all talking about the same thing, the thermonuclear core of the bomb. And the last thing I would say about the past is Y-12 has manufactured every secondary for every warhead or bomb in the U.S. stockpile. There hasn't been another place that's had this capacity to do it. Go ahead, Rick. That's not all that we do in Oak Ridge. So this slide says in the present, manufacture of thermonuclear secondaries is still an active mission at Y-12, and it is the dominant mission at Y-12. Everything else takes a back seat. But they also assess secondaries. They do surveillance and maintenance as part of the stockpile stewardship plan. They prepare highly enriched uranium for downblending. They process highly enriched uranium for nuclear naval reactor fuel. Our submarines and aircraft carriers that run on nuclear reactors use highly enriched uranium, weapons grade, in some cases even more enriched than weapons grade uranium to power those reactors. So it runs through the same machinery here in Oak Ridge. They also are responsible for long-term storage of highly enriched uranium, and last and usually least, responsible for dismantling the secondaries of warheads from retired nuclear weapons. Go ahead. Right now, Y-12 is actively producing secondaries as part of the life extension program that you heard Mary Leah talking about, and we are right now manufacturing secondaries for the W-76 warhead, modification 1. Although my understanding is our secondaries aren't any different than the ones they're replacing. They're just a rebuilt secondary being plunked into this. The part that makes the W-76 a warhead with novel military capabilities is what you're going to hear about from Hans and Matthew, most of which takes place at Kansas City. And then the other thing that we're doing now is we are currently preparing for the manufacture of B-61 replacement secondaries. That's the next warhead slated for the life extension program, and that'll happen at Y-12 as well. Go ahead, Rick. The current operations take place in, it may seem to you that this is just a grainy picture that makes this facility look decrepit, but this is actually building 9212 complex where they are manufacturing thermonuclear secondaries now, and it literally is disintegrating. It was built during the Manhattan Project. They thought it would be needed for maybe 25, 30 years. They did not intend that 70 years later we would still be manufacturing thermonuclear secondaries in this decrepit building. And anything that you could imagine that might go wrong in that building does go wrong. Chunks of concrete falling from the ceiling, water leaking in during rains, fire suppression systems constantly. We had 3 oxidation events in the last 4 months at Y-12. Oxidation events are fires inside the facility. Go ahead. And then this is the future. So replacing that beat up old structure, the plan is for the uranium processing facility, which is the new bomb plant proposed in 2005 to be built at Oak Ridge, which my colleague Jay has dubbed the tip of the spear of modernization. Because of the considerable amount of the life extension program going forward will rely on the work that can only be done at Y-12. And if it can no longer be done at Y-12 because they don't have a new bomb plant, the old bomb plant has collapsed on them, then we have undercut the whole modernization program. So in 2005, they announced this plan to replace all of the aging facilities with this, what they call the big box uranium processing facility, and it would house all highly enriched uranium operations. Well, what they didn't plan on was, which they should have because of their track record, they didn't plan on their gross incompetence, which seems to be built into the structure of the National Nuclear Security Administration. But after they spent $500 million and several years, the design team discovered they reached 85% design completion when they discovered the facility they had designed was not big enough to hold all the equipment it would need to hold. So the space fit issue, which later they acknowledged cost $538 million, $500 million down the drain because Plan A didn't work. They went to work on Plan B, and just after Senator Lamar Alexander is our Tennessee senator, and he grew up 35 miles away from Oak Ridge, and he chairs the Appropriations, Energy, and Water Development Subcommittee in the Senate, which means he holds the purse string. This is his baby. As long as Lamar Alexander wants the money to flow, it's going to flow. So he came to Oak Ridge in 2014, and he declared in June the price tag for the UPF bomb plant had gone from an original estimate of $1.5 billion to $6 billion. And he declared, I've about had it with these projects that start out costing $1 billion and they end up costing $6 billion. So he had drawn a line in the sand, and 2 weeks later the Department of Defense released an estimate that the facility would cost close to $19 billion. So Lamar had an uh-oh moment. That's what he said. As a result, the plan for the UPF was modified, and everything that wasn't bomb production was stripped out of it. So now we have, now we don't just have one big box, we have 7 facilities that you see in this artist rendering here. And the sole purpose of these facilities is to produce thermonuclear secondaries. So any of the other dismantlement work or preparation for Navy fuel or all of those kinds of missions are going to continue to happen in equally decrepit and deteriorating facilities for 20 to 30 years. Facilities we learned when we required them to do an environmental impact statement, facilities that already fail to meet environmental and worker safety standards. But the United States plans to use them to continue to do some of our weapons work for the next 20 to 30 years. Go ahead, Rick. The uranium processing facility right now, Tennessee Senator Lamar Alexander says it's going to come in at $6.5 billion. This is a ludicrously unbelievable assertion since they've spent over $3 billion on the design. They have not yet begun construction. But in the bottom corner here, this dirt area is where they have begun site preparation for the UPF. The production capacity of this facility, if it is completed, will be 80 secondaries per year, which is the magic number, matching the production capacity that they hope to achieve for the pits at Los Alamos. And I'll just underscore one of the things that Jay said. In an environmental impact statement in this country, which the government has to complete before it does any major project, they're required to consider all reasonable alternatives. So they have to lay them out, 1, 2, 3, 4, however many there are, and compare the different impacts. And in the process of preparing the environmental impact statement on the original uranium processing facility, they acknowledged that they could fully fulfill their mission of stockpile surveillance and maintenance with a production capacity of less than 10 warheads per year. That's how much we need in order to do our stockpile stewardship and maintenance program to assure a safe and reliable stockpile going forward. But they said in a line in this EIS, that would not support new design or significant modifications of future warheads. So the whole reason for 80 secondaries per year is, as Jay said, to enable them to be set up to design and produce new nuclear warheads. It has nothing to do with stockpile stewardship and maintenance. I think I'm done there.
That's it. All right, thanks, Ralph. Any questions for Ralph? Yes. Yeah, go ahead.
Mark Harrison with the United Methodist Church. I think you hit on something for us, is that the churches in Tennessee are complicit in this.
Oh, absolutely.
Why are we complicit in it? Because we have people who work in those facilities. And because they work in those facilities, the pastors in those churches will say nothing. The United Methodist bishops in that state will say nothing. So that is a real problem that we face.
Yeah, I would just say in response, our organization, the Oak Ridge Environmental Peace Alliance, has done some work with faith-based communities there. In 2015, on the 70th commemoration of Hiroshima, we released a pastoral letter. I'm not sure we had any Methodist pastors sign it. We had lay people sign it. I think we may have had Bishop Chamberlain, who was retired and moved out of the community, who signed it. Yeah. In 2005, when we had a consultation of religious leaders, the United Methodist bishop then participated, but he's moved on. You're absolutely right. It's a very difficult situation for pastors. A different collar that I wear is I'm an ordained minister in the Presbyterian Church. I don't practice that any longer because I work full-time at this. But United Church of Christ, Unitarian Universalists have been willing to speak out and provide some leadership, but we're working on it.
Yeah, Jay.
Okay, so question. So Ralph, you mentioned the need for public review or environmental review of the uranium processing facility, and then you also mentioned that basically after blowing up $500 million, they changed the design. So has there been fresh environmental review of what they are now planning, and what is the status of that?
Thank you for that softball, Jay, and let me see if I can hit it. So I would say, following Mary Leah's good lead of making some recommendations, there are 2 points of vulnerability for this new bomb plant in Oak Ridge, the uranium processing facility bomb plant. One is budgetary. It is going to blow the lid off of Lamar Alexander's assured budget. And we have seen in the recent past that has compromised the integrity of the project when the price tag got so high. I'm not sure the Trump administration is going to feel that constraint is valid, but we'll see. The other is the significant change in the plan was not accompanied by a new environmental review, as some of us believe is warranted under the National Environment Policy Act in this country. And so there is the possibility of a legal challenge on those grounds, that they have failed to follow the proper procedure. This alone would not stop the bomb plant, although if our challenge is strong enough, it could provoke an injunction that prevents them from beginning construction until it's resolved. The challenge would delay the project, and delay drives the price tag up, so we end up back at the dollars and cents spot. We are in the process of having that environmental analysis performed by a legal team, and hopefully even yet this week we'll get a report back from them that tells us whether or not we have grounds for litigation to push forward with that.
Would
So-
you mind a guest comment?
Oh, go ahead.
Another pressure point is challenging the interoperable Warhead 1, because these two bomb plants, the plutonium plant and the uranium processing facility, are justified by the interoperable Warhead 1. If that doesn't come down the pipe, there is no, at least immediate justification for these facilities. And the letter to the Government Accountability Office that went yesterday asking for their investigation was to look at some alternatives, and we may actually have some useful ammunition if they look at this justification and this relationship between the bomb plants and that particular warhead design.
Matthew, did you have a question?
I can wait till after.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, Claire Gainsfielder again from, I didn't say my group, I'm with Inochi Plutonium for Future. We're a Japanese-US group that works on these issues, mostly volunteered for many years. Which your report brought up for me when you talked about the big box idea, the Rokasho plant in Japan,
Yeah.
in northern Japan, which if you've never been there is an astonishing place. They even give you little cookies with the nuclear symbol on it when you visit.
Oh,
with
we
very-
don't do that.
With incredibly
Anymore.
lovely young women in
you
fabulous
eat that?
uniforms.
Is there a plutonium in the cookies?
That could be. There's a lot of plutonium in Japan. It made me wonder, because they, as opposed to Oak Ridge, it's an incredibly modernized facility that produces highly enriched uranium as one of its 4 missions. With the interrelationship between Japan and the US, has there ever been discussion of the US using highly enriched uranium from Rokasho? For its, I know it would be against the Constitution, Japanese Constitution, to contribute to a nuclear bomb in the US, but I'm just curious if that's ever been a backup plan.
I don't know the answer to that specific question. I can say this, which might relate to it, and then we might get an answer from back there too. That is, the U.S. is constrained by agreements right now that we can only use U.S. sourced uranium to produce tritium for nuclear weapons. So we're producing tritium in reactors operated by the Tennessee Valley Authority, which is quasi-governmental and not private. And they have been required to sole source the uranium for the fuel for the reactor that will eventually result in tritium for weapons from U.S. sources. So I think that's a legal requirement, particularly. You had some insight.
Sharon's listening to CSIS. I would just add that Rokasho plant doesn't produce HEU, it just produces low enriched uranium. So
Under 19%.
Oh, okay.
So that wouldn't be weapons usable, but even if it were weapons usable for precisely the reasons that Ralph mentioned, we wouldn't take
So they're only doing civilian power plant production.
it. Certainly right.
It's actually not
Yeah.
working.
And it's not working.
And
the
there's
centrifuges
estimates
crashed.
that Y-12 has 400 metric tons of HEU anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sister Megan, and then we'll move on to Hans and Matthew.
4 or 5 years ago, we heard that 10,000 tons
That's poker.
of highly enriched uranium was being stored in that facility 4 or 5 years ago. Is that correct?
Well, I think it's 300 to 400 tons,
Oh, 300 to 400 tons.
metric
Big
tons,
difference.
yes.
Now, they've been continuing to produce it, right?
Not enriching uranium to high enriched standards. We have more than we know what to do with right now.
Oh, so every day now, that's not the work. In other words, I always wonder, what are they doing with what they're making?
They are manufacturing, they're actually taking highly enriched uranium and forming and shaping it into the components that make the thermonuclear core.
You know, it should be pointed out that Sister Megan managed to touch the walls of where they have that up to 400.
I dare say she's been closer to it than any of us in the room.
She's our resident expert.
We labeled the building.
Yeah.
All right, thanks so much, Ralph. So now I'd like to